It was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives, the bride, radiant and trembling with anticipation, standing at the altar, and then he just vanished. The room held its breath, the ceremony paused, laughter turned to worried whispers. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. But back to that moment, where did he go? And what she discovered in the days and months that followed would change everything. The groom was the kind of man people admired. Tall, sharply dressed, and carrying himself with a quiet confidence that made everyone around him feel at ease. He was the friend who showed up when you needed help moving, the co-worker who always had a joke ready to break tension, the son who seemed destined to make his parents proud. He had built a good career, owned his first home before 30, and to everyone watching, he was living proof that hard work and charm could carry a man far. But beyond all of that, what made him most unforgettable was how he looked at the woman who was about to become his wife. He adored her, or at least that's what it appeared to be. Their story had all the makings of a fairy tale. Yet, as the day unfolded, cracks no one had expected would begin to show. The bride had spent her entire morning preparing, surrounded by sisters, cousins, and friends who couldn't stop complimenting her smile. Her dress, a delicate white lace that shimmered with each movement, seemed to have been sewn with love itself. She was deeply in love, her heart anchored to the man she believed would never betray her trust. Her laughter filled the bridal suite, soft and contagious, echoing off the walls as she recalled how he had proposed one rainy evening under the glow of streetlights. But under that laughter, nerves pulsed through her body, excitement tangled with fear, a common feeling for brides, yet somehow stronger in her chest. She told herself it was normal, just jitters, nothing more. And yet, somewhere inside, a voice she quickly silenced whispered a question: what if he doesn't show? It was a thought she pushed away, unwilling to imagine a reality where her love story did not end with forever. The families were gathered, and while most wore smiles, there was an undercurrent few acknowledged aloud. On the bride's side, pride swelled in every relative's chest. They spoke quietly about how the groom was a blessing, how he was finally bringing stability, and how their daughter had found a man worth cherishing. On the groom's side, though, it was different. His parents smiled, yes, but there were silent disagreements lingering between relatives, disputes that had never quite been resolved. Some whispered about money, others about choices the groom had made in the past that not everyone approved of. Yet, in public, they all held hands, sat together, and nodded along as if no tension existed. The church filled with chatter, perfumes, and the rustle of satin dresses and pressed suits. Friends exchanged hugs, laughter rang out, and everything looked perfect. But in that perfection there were secrets, fragile and waiting. At the front of the church, the priest stood ready, flipping through notes and rehearsing vows under his breath. His eyes scanned the crowd, noting the size of it, the energy, the weight of the moment that was about to unfold. Close friends of the couple adjusted ties, shared knowing smiles, and teased one another about who would cry first when the bride walked down the aisle. It was the picture of a community united in love, a day that was meant to bind not just two people but two families forever. But even as the organist prepared, as guests took their seats and turned their phones on silent, there was something else in the air. Something unspoken, something no one could yet see. Because what was at stake was more than flowers and vows. What was at risk wasn't just a marriage, it was reputations, legacies, and lives that would never be the same again. The morning of the wedding began like any other. The groom was seen by a hotel staff member just after sunrise, dressed in casual clothes, stepping out of his room with his phone in hand. He greeted them politely, even joked about the day ahead, his voice steady and calm. To anyone watching, nothing seemed unusual. He carried a small duffel bag, though no one questioned it. Grooms often brought changes of clothes or small personal items. But that was the last confirmed sighting. After that moment he was gone. Hours later, when he was expected at the church, his phone was silent, and his whereabouts unknown. The bride believed he was running late, the family assumed a simple delay, but as minutes turned to hours, the truth became harder to ignore. He had walked out of his hotel room and vanished, leaving a trail of confusion in his wake. Inside the church, guests were beginning to notice the time. The whispers started as nervous laughter. Someone joked that the groom was taking his time fixing his tie. Others said he might be caught in traffic. But soon, laughter turned to uncertainty, and uncertainty turned to worry. Mothers checked their watches, fathers tapped their feet, and the priest shifted uneasily at the altar. Every minute felt heavier than the one before. The bride, sitting in a room nearby, clutched her bouquet tighter, her fingers trembling. She asked for updates, reassured herself he would walk through the doors any moment. Yet with every passing second, silence stretched further, and the weight of expectation pressed down on everyone present. The air grew thicker, the smiles faded, and behind closed doors, relatives exchanged looks that revealed more fear than they were willing to admit aloud. Something wasn't right and everyone felt it. By midday, the bride's phone buzzed with messages that only deepened the mystery. A text from the groom's number appeared, short and strange, telling her not to worry and that he would explain everything soon. She stared at the words, her hands trembling as she read them again and again. Something about it felt off. The phrasing wasn't his, the rhythm of the words didn't match the way he spoke. He had a certain warmth, a certain charm even in his simplest messages, but this was cold, clipped, distant. She showed it to her sister, who frowned immediately. "This doesn't sound like him," she whispered. Another message followed, telling her to stall, to keep people calm, but offering no reason why. The bride's heart raced, confusion crashing into dread. Was it possible he had written them in a rush? Or was it possible someone else had his phone? Family members pressed the bride to stay calm, insisting there must be a reasonable explanation. Friends suggested perhaps nerves had gotten the best of him. But she couldn't silence the pounding in her chest. These weren't his words. They couldn't be. She knew the way he spoke better than anyone. The evidence was small, subtle, but undeniable. The phone was active, yes, but the man she loved was nowhere to be found. Hours earlier he was walking out of his hotel room, and now he was only a series of strange messages that did nothing to bring comfort. And then the thought that chilled her most settled deep in her mind. If he didn't write those messages, then who did? Panic slowly began to seep through the bride's heart as minutes stretched into an hour. She paced the small bridal room, bouquet trembling in her grip, her lipstick smudged from nervously biting her lip. "He wouldn't do this to me," she whispered over and over, though her voice carried more doubt with each repetition. Her mother tried to soothe her, assuring her that men often froze under pressure, that he would walk through the doors at any moment. But her father grew restless, glancing at his watch and muttering about respect and shame. The contrast in reactions only deepened her unease. Was she supposed to hope or prepare for heartbreak? Outside, ushers began stalling guests, whispering excuses about traffic, about a minor delay, anything to keep the crowd from realizing the truth. But truth had a way of seeping through cracks, and the cracks in this story were beginning to widen. Among the guests, tension swelled like a storm cloud. Some tried to laugh it off, suggesting the groom might simply have cold feet. Others whispered darker possibilities, debts he couldn't face, obligations he had hidden, maybe even another woman waiting elsewhere. Old friends leaned close, sharing rumors in hushed tones, while neighbors nodded knowingly as if they had expected something like this all along. What was meant to be a sacred celebration was turning into a public spectacle, each passing minute making the absence feel more permanent. For the bride's family, the silence became humiliation. For the groom's family, it became defensiveness, as though every whisper was a direct attack on their son's character. Soon it wasn't just about a missing groom, it was about pride, reputation, and the embarrassment of an entire community. Then came the complication no one had expected. Among the crowd sat an old friend of the groom, a man who had once been close to the bride as well. His name had surfaced in past arguments, always brushed off as history, something left behind. But now his presence felt charged, almost intrusive. Some whispered he had never truly let her go, that perhaps he had reasons to want the wedding delayed if not destroyed. He carried himself with a calm that unsettled those who noticed him, a calm that didn't match the chaos swirling in the room. The bride caught sight of him briefly, her stomach tightening at the sight of his smile, a smile that seemed out of place for the moment. He wasn't panicked like the others. He wasn't even worried. And that calm, that unsettling composure, hinted that he knew more than he was willing to admit. It wasn't long before whispers turned into undeniable suspicion. A cousin of the bride returned from outside, her face pale, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She had been speaking to a friend across town who claimed to have seen something. A car pulling out from behind the groom's hotel earlier that morning. The detail alone might have seemed unimportant, but the video footage she showed to a few family members told a different story. The grainy clip revealed the groom stepping into the passenger seat of a dark sedan, his duffel bag tossed carelessly into the back. But he wasn't alone. A figure sat behind the wheel, their face obscured by shadows. The groom leaned forward, spoke quickly, and then the car rolled away. The revelation left the family speechless. If he left willingly, why hadn't he told anyone? And if he didn't, who had taken him? Before we continue, let us ask you, If this were your wedding day standing in the bride's place, would you wait and hope for the man you loved, or would you walk away before the truth destroyed you? Let us know in the comments, we'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story has you as captivated as it has us, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the gripping stories we bring every week. Now, back to the mystery, because what happened next would make everything even harder to explain. By the second hour of waiting, the mood had shifted from anxious to desperate. What should have been a wedding turned into something far more unsettling. The priest stepped aside and the families, once divided by whispers, found themselves united in fear. Calls were made to local authorities, and before long investigators entered the church. The decorated pews, the flowers, the soft music, it all remained, but the spirit of celebration was gone. Instead, it became the backdrop of a search. Officers asked questions, scribbled notes, and studied faces, while guests lingered in confusion. The bride, still in her gown, sat trembling in the back room, her veil slightly torn from running her hands through her hair. Tears stained her cheeks, smearing her makeup, but she refused to leave. She couldn't. Somewhere between denial and hope, she clung to the belief that the man she loved would walk in, smiling, and make all of this vanish. But the reality deepened when investigators reviewed nearby CCTV footage. The groom had indeed left his hotel earlier that morning, confirming the witness reports. The footage showed him walking briskly, his face tense, his duffel bag swinging from his hand. What unsettled everyone most was the figure beside him, an unknown person dressed in dark clothing. Their face was obscured, their movements hurried. The groom didn't appear distressed, but neither did he look joyful. The pair walked quickly to the same dark sedan that had been spotted before. They spoke briefly, then got inside. The car pulled away, and that was the last trace anyone had of him. The discovery sparked debates in every corner of the room. Had he been coerced? Was this a planned escape? The questions multiplied, but the answers remained locked in silence, hidden with the man who was supposed to be standing at the altar. The bride's composure crumbled when she saw the footage. Her body shook as she whispered his name over and over, her voice barely audible. Friends surrounded her, some trying to comfort, others holding back tears themselves. She couldn't understand. If he had left willingly, why hadn't he told her? Why humiliate her like this? But if it wasn't willing, if he had been taken, then what kind of danger was he in? The uncertainty gnawed at her soul. Every laugh they had shared, every promise he had made replayed in her mind, but now they felt like fragments of a life slipping away. She pressed her hands to her chest, the weight of humiliation and grief nearly crushing her. The image of him with someone else, leaving her behind, became a wound that words couldn't heal. The wedding was no longer a celebration of love. It had transformed into a mystery unraveling before their eyes. As investigators dug deeper, another unsettling piece of information surfaced. Days before the wedding, the groom had withdrawn a large sum of money from his bank account. Not once but several times. It wasn't a small amount, it was enough to raise serious questions. Why would a man about to marry, with so many expenses already covered, suddenly take out thousands of dollars in cash? Had he been planning something in secret? Or had someone forced him into it? The discovery only deepened the split between those who believed he had run away and those who feared he was in danger. The bride's family clung to the hope of foul play. It was easier than imagining betrayal. The groom's family, however, grew defensive, insisting he wasn't the kind of man to abandon his future so cruelly. Yet the evidence painted a murkier picture than either side wanted to accept. And as the investigation pressed forward, one truth grew harder to ignore. The groom's disappearance was not as simple as nerves or hesitation. It was deliberate, calculated, and tied to secrets no one had fully understood. But where was he planning to go with the money he had taken? And why had he chosen this day of all days to vanish? The answers were still buried, but what lay ahead would prove to be darker than anyone expected. Hours slipped by with no sign of the groom, and the once celebratory crowd thinned into silence. Police widened their search, checking nearby highways and neighborhoods. Then came the discovery that shifted the tone from confusion to alarm. A call came in reporting an abandoned car parked off a rural road just miles from the hotel. Officers rushed to the scene, and what they found left more questions than answers. The vehicle was the groom's, his registration still in the glove box. His jacket was folded neatly in the back seat, along with his phone charger, his watch, and the duffel bag he had been seen carrying earlier. But the one thing missing was him. The bride's family waited anxiously for news, clinging to hope, but when word spread of the abandoned car, it was no longer just a matter of lateness. Something was deeply wrong and everyone could feel it. Inside the car, investigators discovered something more disturbing than the personal belongings. On the passenger seat lay a note, folded once and carefully placed. The handwriting was uneven, the strokes heavy, almost rushed. It read only a few words, yet each one cut deeply. "I can't go through with this." Those 7 words shattered the last strands of certainty holding the families together. To the bride, it felt like a death sentence. Not just the death of her wedding day but the death of trust, the death of promises once carved into her heart. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "This isn't him, it can't be him." Friends surrounded her, some convincing themselves he had run away, others swearing he must have been forced to write it. The note was damning, yet it didn't feel like the man they knew. It felt wrong, as though something about it had been staged. Forensic officers compared the handwriting, and soon, the revelation came that deepened the mystery. The loops of the letters, the slant of the words, it didn't match the groom's known handwriting samples. He was meticulous, precise in every detail of his life, from his financial records to the love notes he once wrote to the bride. This note was sloppy, rushed, almost like it was written by someone trying to mimic him but failing to capture the subtleties of his style. This discovery set off a storm of theories. If he hadn't written the note, then who had? Was it the unknown figure from the CCTV footage? Was it someone trying to cover their tracks, to make it appear like a runaway groom when the truth was something far darker? By now, the bride was beyond despair, clutching the dress she once wore with pride as though it were the last tangible piece of the life she believed she was building. The families spiraled further into conflict. One side cried betrayal, the other cried conspiracy. But as police carried the note away for further analysis, the entire community was left to wrestle with the terrifying possibility that this disappearance wasn't simply about cold feet. It might have been something far more calculated. The groom's belongings were left behind. His car was abandoned. A note was planted. And yet, the one person who could answer all of it remained missing, silent, and unreachable. Before we continue, I want to ask you this. If you were in the bride's position, would you believe the man you loved had abandoned you, or would you cling to the idea that someone else was behind it all? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to know what you think. And if this story has you hooked so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the powerful stories we share every week. Now, as investigators dug deeper, what they uncovered next would unravel everything they thought they knew about this case. The bride sat alone in the aftermath of the note's discovery, her thoughts tearing at her from every side. Was the life she had built with him real, or had it all been a lie? The laughter they shared, the promises whispered late at night, the dreams of building a family together. Suddenly each memory felt tainted, each word rehearsed. She replayed their last conversation in her mind, clinging to every detail, searching for signs she might have missed. Had his smile been forced? Had his embrace already begun to loosen? The possibility that he had abandoned her on purpose crushed her spirit, but what unsettled her most was the other possibility, the idea that someone had forced his hand, that he had been silenced before he could explain. The weight of both possibilities left her torn in half, trapped between heartbreak and dread, with no way to know which was true. As police dug deeper into his background, unsettling truths surfaced that painted a very different picture of the groom. On the surface he was charming, responsible, and admired. But underneath there were fractures no one had spoken of. Investigators uncovered records of financial debts, large sums borrowed, payments missed, and quiet transactions that hinted at desperation. Some whispered that he had fallen into gambling, others suspected a business deal gone wrong. More disturbing still were whispers of his possible ties to men involved in crime, men known to make problems disappear when money couldn't be repaid. These weren't rumors crafted by gossip, they were buried details, slowly coming to light. The perfect groom, the man everyone thought they knew, was suddenly painted as someone living on the edge of danger. For the bride, the revelations felt like betrayal stacked on betrayal, each one threatening to undo the man she thought she loved. Then came the confession that sent chills through everyone present. A close friend of the groom, pale and trembling, finally admitted that days before the wedding, the groom had confided in him. He had said he was afraid for his life. The groom had spoken in fragments, never giving full details, but enough to make it clear he believed someone was watching him. He said the wedding was more than just a union of love, it was a target, a spotlight that made him vulnerable. The friend had urged him to go to the police, but the groom had refused, muttering only that things would make sense soon. Now that cryptic fear echoed louder than ever. The bride clutched her chest when she heard this, asking herself, had he truly wanted to marry her, or had he known all along that danger would keep them apart? The line between love and fear blurred until it became almost indistinguishable. As the layers of this tangled story unfolded, suspicion turned inward. Could someone within the bride's own family have played a role? Whispers spread of hidden resentment, financial disputes, and family tensions that had long been buried beneath polite smiles. Some relatives had much to lose if the marriage went forward. Old grudges, inheritance questions, and pride that ran deeper than love. The idea that betrayal might have come not from strangers but from the people closest to her left the bride shattered. She had trusted not just her groom, but her family to protect her happiness. Now both sides looked fractured, with no clear line between loyalty and deceit. The thought alone was unbearable, but with every passing hour, the circle of suspicion only grew smaller, pressing closer to home. And then came the revelation that shattered the community to its core. Investigators traced one final piece of evidence: phone records that placed a member of the wedding party near the site where the groom's car was abandoned. It wasn't a random guest. It wasn't a stranger lurking in the shadows. It was someone who had stood with the couple, someone who had smiled through the photographs, someone who was supposed to celebrate, not destroy. The implications were devastating. What had started as a love story was now a mystery tangled in betrayal, crime, and fear. And this next revelation would shatter the entire community. The search for answers reached its breaking point when investigators stumbled upon the most devastating truth of all. The groom, the man painted as the perfect partner, the future husband who had promised forever, had not been living just one life. Hidden beneath layers of secrecy was an entire existence no one at that church had ever imagined. Records revealed another name, another set of documents, and with them, a trail that led to another city, where he had been living a second life. In that place he wasn't a groom preparing to walk down the aisle. He was someone else entirely, tied to another woman, another story, another set of promises he never kept. For the bride, the revelation landed like a crushing blow. Every kiss, every moment, every plan they had made together now felt poisoned by deception. She wasn't just mourning the absence of the man she loved, she was mourning the realization that he had never fully belonged to her. The family who had once stood proudly at the decorated altar was ripped apart by shame and disbelief. Some defended him, insisting there must have been a reason. Others condemned him, unable to forgive the betrayal. In the small town, word spread like wildfire, leaving neighbors stunned, divided, and desperate to know how such a secret could have been kept for so long. But the truth wasn't as simple as infidelity alone. Investigators discovered his secret life was tangled with threats he couldn't escape. The debts, the whispered warnings, the fear he confessed to his friend, they weren't just shadows. They were real, pressing, and dangerous. He had been running not just from the altar but from enemies who had been closing in. To them, his disappearance was the only way to survive. To the bride and her community, it was the deepest wound they had ever known. And yet, one question lingered heavier than all the rest. It wasn't simply where he went, or who he left behind. It was why he felt he could never return. In the weeks that followed, the bride's world shifted from shock to survival. The image of her standing at the altar, waiting for a groom who would never arrive, became the defining wound of her life. But slowly, through grief and disbelief, she began to reclaim her strength. The wedding dress, once a symbol of joy, was carefully packed away, not as a reminder of humiliation but as a marker of endurance. She faced the whispers, the rumors, the questions that never seemed to end, and though each word cut deep, she found a new voice inside herself. A voice that refused to be defined by betrayal, but by resilience. She was not just the woman left behind, she became the woman who stood back up. For the community, the lesson was harder to swallow. They had celebrated a picture-perfect love story, one they believed was built on trust and devotion. But what unfolded reminded them all that appearances could be deceiving. A charming smile could hide debt. A confident stride could mask fear. And even the man who promised forever could be carrying secrets too heavy to share. The church bells that once rang in anticipation of joy now echoed as a reminder of the fragility of trust and the mysteries that sometimes live within those closest to us. And yet, the questions lingered. Some whispered that the groom had been running from his demons, a man trapped by his own double life. Others swore he had been silenced before the truth could ever come out. What do you think really happened? Was he a victim of forces beyond his control, or an architect of his own downfall? Was justice served, or is this story still unfinished? Share your thoughts in the comments, we truly want to hear your perspective. If this story gripped you, hit like, and subscribe for more shocking true stories that uncover the hidden lives behind closed doors.